how do we make this better? How do we make creativity a positive asset for those on the staff so that working with the comm team or the productions team isn't like, oh man, I got to go deal with these guys again. But instead, it's let's partner up, leverage the horsepower of creativity for the mission of the gospel.
Hey everybody, this is Patrick Elkins with the Church Creatives Network, here today to have a great conversation with a good friend of mine, Matt Curtis. He lives in Enola, Pennsylvania. Matt has served for over 16 years in creative ministry. That's a long stint for anybody, including being on staff at Mariners Church, High Desert Church. He's been the creative minister, which means he was leading production and communications teams. And now he's chasing his passion to help creatives last and thrive in ministry, as well as build healthy creatives teams with his new company called Lunchtime Heroes. Matt, it's great to have you here today. I'm really excited just to highlight what you're doing for churches. Tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into this creative realm.
Yeah, so I was a graphic design major in college, technically an art major with an emphasis in graphic design. My dad was a theology professor, taught at Biola University in Talbot. So he represented the Bible side of the organization of the university, and I was in kind of the rogue, like, are these guys Christians art department? So there was always these weird tensions between the two spaces. But I saw the passion and the power of God's word and its ability to change lives. But I also saw this mechanism of art and creativity as an equally, not equally maybe, but a similarly powerful tool. Maybe culture would say equally powerful tool. We obviously would say, nah, there's a little benefit here in the work of the Spirit. But regardless, those two things to me were really compelling. So what happens if we just put them together? What happens if we use both of them instead of one or the other? And so that really led to an interest. I say led to, it was less of an intentional decision. I was going to do 3D animation or architecture. Neither of those existed at the university. And so, sure, my roommate who I just met 2 days before was a graphic design major. Let's do that. And so that was kind of what pushed me into that space. A couple of years down the road, I realized you can do creative work for missions, which I care deeply about. Yeah. And all of a sudden, it began this kind of long rabbit trail where I felt like I was following more than driving, and led me to a church out of college, Mariners Church. Frustration right out of the gate. How is this organization running? Like, these systems aren't working. Creativity can be better here. And eventually realized that this angst was actually, I would go as far as to say, a degree of a call on my life to say, well, then let's make it better. How about that? Wow. And so that's really kind of been my focus over the duration of time that was my on-staff career, but then also what I'm doing today. How do we make this better? How do we make creativity a positive asset for those on the staff so that working with the comm team or the productions team isn't like, oh man, I got to go deal with these guys again? But instead, it's let's partner up, leverage the horsepower of creativity for the mission of the gospel.
Man, I love that. And obviously now transitioning into this space where you're launching your own company, which is specifically ministering to or serving these creative leaders or just these creatives who are trying to, again, thrive and stay healthy in ministry. So with the ebbs and flows and the highs and lows of serving on staff and being a part of these different environments, what was it that kind of like, or I'll ask this, what is driving your mission with Lunchtime Heroes?
So the second church that I worked at, High Desert Church, when I stepped in, longevity was one of the hallmarks of their ministry. I'll be honest with you, I did not appreciate it early in my career. At one point, a friend and I who had been there for probably 7 or 8 years, which is kind of crazy when you think about 7 or 8 years on staff at a church, at one church, we looked at each other and we said, I wonder how long we've been here and how far up the ladder we are, not positionally, but in terms of tenure. We looked, more than half the staff had been there longer than us, even that far into our careers. And so we had this season over kind of the more recent past where there was a lot more turnover than there ever had been historically. And when I looked around, I could see the impact of that on our ministry. It's not that the new people weren't good people, but there's something powerful about longevity in ministry when it comes to trust built, when it comes to shepherding the same families over and over and over again and
Yeah.
caring for them in different ways through different seasons, through different challenges. And as I reflected on the impact of what I was able to do at High Desert for 13 years, it didn't become clear to me until I stepped off the team. But I could see that longevity was a major part of the impact. And so then I, kind of turned to Facebook, join all these church communications groups, and I see this rapid turnover of people
Wow.
and quick angst, quick frustration. And part of what I focused on, really the original vision for the business, was I know how to solve the complex problems of a team that's imploding. So I'll
Yeah.
just be a consultant. I've heard that's a thing, so I'll just talk to churches that are in a bad spot and I'll help them. And while I do that, I'm realizing that the better use of my time is to invest in the individual creatives that have the potential to lead health themselves in the
Yes.
context of their organization, both for the health of the organization, but also for their longevity in ministry, because I'm confident that when those two things happen, health and longevity, impact is right around the corner. And that's, kind of the ultimate goal. When you hire a new creative, they're not going to be meaningfully impactful right out of the gate. And I think it's sort of a false belief we hold. Maybe this new place will be the answer for me. I mean, maybe, but you're going to have to give it, 3 to 5 years before you start knowing the answer to that question. If we're not lasting that long, then we got a problem. So I
Yes.
really believe in both the power of creativity and the message of the gospel. And I want to see those paired up well. And I can't help every church in America, but I can help a lot more creatives. And so that's kind of the take there.
Would you say that as a creative, most creatives would be able to gauge or anticipate what we might call burnout? Or when you start approaching that threshold, is it evident, or do many creatives not even realize that they're approaching the threshold of burnout? And so, as far as that angst and that agitation and discouragement and all the things, like, how do you typically address that?
Yeah, for me, burnout, it tends to be pretty sneaky. I went through a period of burnout in my job, and the way that it approached me was actually like me walking into a sandstorm. We were in the desert, and so that made a ton of sense because we've driven through those and we've experienced those.
Yeah.
But essentially what happens is you begin to lose visibility on the things around you, and you begin to lose even the ability to discern up, down, left, right, what problems are real, what problems aren't. And so I've always looked at a clear indicator of burnout for me is just how quick you're frustrated about things that actually aren't your job.
Oh, that's
The way I
good.
kind of describe it is I'm carrying baggage that's not my baggage.
Yeah.
And so I'm concerned about the way that small groups are functioning in the church. I'm involved in promoting it. I'm involved in communicating it, at least partially, but it's actually not my problem. I'm not held accountable for those decisions. But if I'm holding the bags, the interesting problem is that I don't actually have a pathway to release those bags
Yeah.
because I can't make any meaningful change in small groups in that example. And so
Yeah.
it really is, what are the things I'm complaining about? And are they part of my job description? It sounds super corporate, but at the end of the day, is this within the scope of expectation that's mine?
Yep.
And then really the charge from there is, look, man, if you're really frustrated by the way that small groups are happening in your church, go be the small groups pastor somewhere. You want to be the senior pastor? Great. We know how to do that. Typically, you go to seminary. Oftentimes, you'll start in youth ministry. You'll serve there for a couple of years. If you go into children's, you don't have a pathway. You're probably stuck. Like we have all of these little pathways that we see operating in the church. So we know how to get to these places, but instead we kind of sit in our creative space, but then we're holding problems that aren't ours. And so if you're holding a lot of problems that aren't yours, there's a good indicator that you're beginning the process toward burnout.
That's great. Great things to highlight, Matt. As far as opportunities with Lunchtime Heroes, do you have spaces opening up for individual consulting? Do you have any cohorts, training sessions? What kind of opportunities do you have on the radar?
Yeah, so there's a couple different tiers for me. The first is YouTube. It's just Lunchtime Heroes on YouTube. It's all free stuff, obviously, but I put out a lot of content there that's going to help teach the basics of, in some cases, communication strategy, but the primary focus is how do you as a creative interface well with leadership.
Yeah.
And so it's navigating some of these complexities. I got a last minute request. Do I tell my boss no? How do I handle this? So it's very practical leadership boosting type stuff. If this is an area where people are like, man, I really need to grow in this, I have a cohort. The next one's going to launch. We'll say August. I'll just pick a date right now. In August, we're launching another one towards the end of the month. And those have been really helpful. They're small groups. There's no more than 7 people in the group, and it's a 7-week commitment. We go through leading ourselves, like how do we adjust as individual people to this idea of leadership? And then how do we lead through the 4 kind of primary areas that our jobs touch? And so 7 weeks, it's been really helpful for the people that have gone through it. And then on the consulting side of things, I mean, obviously if a church is in this position where they're like, man, we are just in a problem state, then reach out and we'll have a conversation. Sometimes the best thing is for somebody to come in for a prolonged period of time, be that safety net. Other times there's simple course corrections that can be made. There's actually a survey or a quiz that you can take. It's at healthycreativeteams.com, and it'll actually walk you through. That's the incorrect URL. I just realized it's healthychurchcreatives.com, and it'll walk you through 24 questions, and it'll kind of diagnose the health of your team and then some tangible next steps in terms of how you can improve from there. So those are kind of the best ways to connect with what I'm doing.
I love that, man. Thank you so much for sharing. So amazing to just kind of hear your heart today. Guys, if you haven't already, search up Matt Curtis in the network, click the follow button, and you can find his space. If you go into our leadership collection, his space is called Lunchtime Heroes. You can join his space and follow him there and communicate with Matt in that section. And of course, here at the Church Creatives Network, we're just honored to bring helpful resources to inspire you guys. So until next time, thanks so much, Matt. Great talking today.
That's it.